It is now my great privilege to introduce one of our distinguished alumni, the Honorable Cedric Richmond, to deliver the graduation address. A native New Orleanian, Cedric Richmond earned his undergraduate degree from Morehouse College before graduating from Tulane Law School in 1998. The very next year, he was elected to the Louisiana House of Representatives, becoming one of the youngest members ever to serve in our state's legislature, and ultimately rising to chair the Judiciary Committee during his 11-year tenure. In 2010, he was elected to represent Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives, a district covering much of New Orleans and stretching across 9 parishes to Baton Rouge. Now in his 4th term, Congressman Richmond serves on the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. Last fall, he was elected chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. At age 43, he is one of the youngest members ever to chair that influential caucus, which now includes 49 members of Congress representing 78 million Americans. Congressman Richmond's leadership and prominence, however, extends beyond the halls of Congress to reach the baseball diamond as well. The New York Times recently hailed him as the Babe Ruth of Congress for his consistently dominating performance on the pitching mound and at the plate in the annual congressional baseball game between Democrats and Republican members. Based on a multi-year analysis of player performance, the Times concluded that Congressman Richmond, quote, dominates the congressional game much as Ruth dominated the American League in 1920. We are enormously proud to call Congressman Richmond one of our own. Please join me in welcoming him back to the law school.
Let me first start off by thanking Dean David Meyer for having me today and giving me the honor of being your graduation speaker. Let me just start with full disclosure. One, about the congressional baseball game. It's not hard to be the best whenever, one, when they're Republicans, and two, when they're Republicans and they're 70 years old. So, I will just say it's really surreal to be back at Tulane School of Law at the graduation, because it reminds me of one of my greatest nightmares, and I have 3 reoccurring nightmares. One of which is that Tulane will wake up one day and realize it was probably a computer glitch when my name came across the screen as completing all the requirements to receive my law degree. The second nightmare is that the city of New Orleans will finally track down the license plate to the car that I used to park in these neighborhoods and accumulate the thousands and thousands of dollars worth of tickets that I had. And the running joke was, if they ever put a boot on my car, I would say, congratulations, you just bought yourself a new car. And the last nightmare, really is not that long ago, just a 100 or so days ago, and it just goes back to that election night. Not the fact that I won, but the fact that somebody else lost. And I keep waking up wondering if it's just a bad dream and that everything would be okay. But let me just also say, in seriousness, taking Tulane and having a law degree from Tulane, when you talk public service, you really just become one among many influential people that chose public service. And not being a politician, but public service, which means doing things for other people for free. It means doing things to help others in their life because that's your calling. So if we think back to some of those Tulane graduates that answered that calling, you hear some really great names. You hear of Hale Boggs, that was a United States congressman and held this seat. And then when Hale rose to majority leader, and then when he died, his wife ran for the seat and served many, many years and was a very distinguished leader in the United States. Also, you think of Huey Long, who was a Tulane law graduate, who was the governor of Louisiana and then served in the United States Senate. Or you think closer to our time, you think of Senator John Hinkle, which was the first person to ever serve as both the Speaker of the House in the State House and as President of the Senate in the State Senate. So when you think of Tulane, think of an institution and a body and a law school that produces not only great legal minds, but legal minds that have the calling to serve the public. And no matter how unpopular public service is, it's something that the school really embeds in us to take very seriously to make a difference in this country. So let me just say to you all, to the class of 2017, congratulations for making it out of Tulane's law school. And you finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, you still have that thing they call the bar exam, but we won't talk about that. And to the parents and the spouses and the friends, let me just congratulate you, and the families, congratulate you on adding a lawyer to the family or another lawyer to the family. But before you do all that hollering and cheering, let me just remind you of one thing. You now have somebody at your dinner table at holidays that will know everything. They will love to argue. They won't want to lose. And if they do lose the argument, they will fall back to my statement that I give my mother all the time, which is, well, which one of us graduated from law school? So just be ready for that. And students, I know you all are a couple of things right now. I know you're relieved, I know you're excited, I know you're anxious. Some of you probably a little hungover. But it's your day and you deserve all of those feelings because you've earned them all. But let me just talk a little bit about what being a lawyer means and what it means today. Because if you think back to the great trial lawyer, Daniel Webster, he said, justice is the greatest concern of man on earth. And you all are the tools to make sure that justice is applied. Now, I know that many of you all are thinking about going out and joining a big firm, making big money, buying a big car, and living in a big house. But just remember that conscientious attorneys are key to our government working. Local government, state government, the U.S. government, attorneys are what keeps the system honest. And we have thousands and thousands of Americans that depend on you to make sure that the system is being honest. Now, I know many of you are probably thinking, Cedric, that's great. Everybody, could do that. But I have $50, $60, $100, $150,000 in student loans, and I can't go just answer the calling for service. I know those feelings. Sally Mae still calls me every month like I owe her child support. But just know that it's a sacrifice. And there's an old teaching throughout time that says, to whom much is given, much is required. And not that anything in life was given to you but the opportunity. And you seized the opportunity. And the obligation that goes with that is to make sure that you create and preserve that opportunity for others. So it's now up to you to make sure that justice and equality and all of those things are more than just words on a page, that this country actually lives up to those ideals in practice. You're joining a profession that carries a great weight, but it's also a very noble profession. You're the only profession, you will be the only people that have the right and the ability to go into a courtroom and advocate on behalf of others. So you have to remember that when you do that comes different responsibilities. You have to resist that urge to win at all costs. You have to remember that it's the process that is just as important as the outcome. You have to remember the pillars of the justice system and that you have to stand in stark contrast to what is wrong. You have to be above reproach. And if you think back to what Confucius says, he says to know what is right and not to do it is the worst cowardice. And I'm asking you as Tulane law graduates to be strong because we don't produce cowards. We produce people that will swim upstream, people that will say what is needed to say, people that will be the conscience of this great country. And let me just give you some statistics about what happens when people sit back and not do what's right in stark times. Let's just look at Louisiana. At least 49 Louisiana prisoners and 6 federal prisoners have been exonerated from wrongful convictions. 11 were sentenced to death. 13 were sentenced to life without parole, and 18 were sentenced to life. Those are just the ones we know of. So remember, for those who will decide that I want to be a prosecutor and make our community safe, I applaud you for that. But remember, your goal is not to have a great conviction rate. Your goal is to be honest, steadfast, and true, and to weigh all and put out all of the evidence and make your best argument. But it's up to that jury and that judge to decide guilt or innocence. So when we decide not to put all of the facts on the table, or we decide not to call all the witnesses, remember, we are putting our great democracy at harm. And I would remind you of an old Egyptian proverb that says, because we're focused on the snake, we miss the scorpion. And I will just say that I want you to stay focused, but you have to be aware, because I don't want you to get stung by the scorpion while you're just simply trying not to get bitten by the snake. And since the dean mentioned congressional baseball, I'll give you an old baseball story on staying focused. Yogi Berra is one of the greatest catchers of all time. New York Yankee catcher, talked a lot of garbage. But that's what he was known for. And this young kid came up, Hank Aaron, in the World Series. And Hank comes to the plate, and Yogi Berra says, "Hey, Hank." Hank ignores him. He said, "Hank." Hank looks back, he says, "You know, Hank, you have to turn the baseball bat so that you can read the writing on it when you're about to hit the ball." Hank just ignores him. So he says, "Hank, turn the writing around so the bat won't crack when you hit the ball." Hank ignores him. First pitch comes. Hank hits a home run in the World Series. He trots around the bases. When he gets to home plate, he says, "Hey, Yogi, I didn't come to the plate to read. I came to the plate to hit the ball." So I tell you that because in life you will hear a bunch of chatter and you will hear a bunch of noise. You have to stay focused on what you're doing, and the noise will come from naysayers, or haters is what I call them. But you'll hear them. They'll tell the lawyer jokes all day long until they need one. And I can tell you, because this is Tulane, I know we have a bunch of doctors in the room, and you can look at the United Airlines case that we just had, and I was talking about it in the back room. You know, that doctor that was pulled off that airline, I bet you 2 months ago he was talking about medical malpractice reform and how bad lawyers are because they're always suing doctors. But when you are done wrong and people treat you with injustice, the first person you call is a lawyer. After Katrina, while I was in After Katrina, when I was in the state legislature, all of my buddies who talked about tort reform and how bad lawyers were and how we mistreated the insurance companies. Well, when our houses were 8 feet underwater, and we had to fight with the insurance companies about what was flood damage and what was wind and hail and rain and all of this other stuff, all of those same anti-lawyers came to seek us because they felt that they were wrong. And I say that to say that you have an obligation to fight for injustice, no matter how unattractive the client may be, or how bad they talk about lawyers. And I'll just close with this, your profession and the nobility. Think about back to almost the beginning of time, but your profession and your calling is actually mentioned in the Bible 3 times. And I won't give you all 3 quotes, but I'll give you the passage from Psalms 82:3 that says, "Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the rights of the afflicted and the destitute." That's your calling. And it wasn't long ago that an attorney I respect, Walt Leger, was giving a speech to the Bar Association. And he talked about the calling and the responsibility, and he said that there's no greater professional calling than to stand as a lawyer at the foot of the bar of justice and breathe life into the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights, into statutory law, into common law, by defining, asserting, and defending the rights of its citizens. So if you think of those rights of its citizens, think back to the beginning of this great nation and our greatest philosophers at the time that crafted and built this country. Many of them were lawyers. If you think of Andrew Hamilton, who defended the first case about freedom of press and the right to report free of censorship and interference, he was a lawyer. Think about Thomas Jefferson as he defined in writing the rights of American citizens. He was a lawyer. Think of James Madison as he fought for the Bill of Rights, what would be included in it, and what it meant to Americans. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. Think of James Madison. Think of Abraham Lincoln, who we all saw with tears in his eyes at the Gettysburg Address as he rededicated our country to the principle of equal justice for all. And then skip centuries to a Thurgood Marshall, who went back to court to refine and improve upon that notion of true equality and equal justice for all. So the question becomes not where you are today and how far you've come, but the question is, where will you be when the fight for justice and equality knocks at your doorstep? The good news is that you all are graduates of Tulane University School of Law, and I know that you will always answer the calling to fight for justice and equality. And we have to remember that this country is not a perfect country, nor has it ever been. But because of you, if you wake up every day remembering that part of your calling is to make this a more perfect union for the people that come behind you, you will leave a legacy that will be undoubtedly irreplaceable or erasable in history's annals. So I will give you this: enjoy your day and party like there's no tomorrow. I welcome you as a fellow graduate of Tulane, but remember, after you pass that bar exam on the first attempt, you have a greater calling, and that is to make this world a better place, one person, one case, one day at a time. Thank you, and God bless you.